Saat Farkı'ndan merhabalar. Her hafta farklı ülkelerden, farklı milletlerden konuklarla bölgesel ve küresel meselelere dair farklı perspektiflere yer vermeye çalışıyoruz. Bu hafta Dünya Kaynakları Enstitüsü, World Resources Institute Türkiye biriminin düzenlediği 10. Yaşanabilir Şehirler Sempozyumu için İstanbul'da bulunan Hollandalı bir misafirim var. Sürdürülebilir şehirler özelinde çalışmalar yürüten WRI World Resources Institute ROSS Center for Sustainable Cities Vekil Global Direktörü Rogier Van Den Berg bizlerle. Kendisi kentsel planlama ve kentsel gelişim uzmanı, bir mimar, bir şehir planlamacısı. Dolayısıyla bu hafta biraz şehirleri, şehirlerin sürdürülebilirliğini, yaşanabilirliğini, İstanbul'u, şehirlerin aynı zamanda iklim kriziyle mücadeledeki rolünü ve tüm bu başlıkları konuşacağız. Welcome, Mr.
Thank you.
Van Den Berg. Am I pronouncing
Yeah,
well?
yeah, you're pronouncing it very well. Thank
Perfect,
you very much.
good. Thank you very much and welcome to Istanbul first. Mr. Van Den Berg, could you please, first of all, give us some more information about World Resources Institute, ROSS Center for Sustainable Cities. What are you doing? What are your main activities, projects here in Turkey as well?
Thank you. Thank you. We are a global organization. We're a non-profit think and do tank, and we help cities to move, towards sustainability, really looking at transformative change and how we can support cities and stakeholders in cities doing that. We're doing that with data analytics, with research, but also very much on-the-ground projects. Here in Turkey, we've been here with the ROSS Center for Sustainable Cities 17 years in Turkey already, working with cities on transportation, on urban development, energy efficiency and road safety primarily. So yeah, that's what we're doing. And well, everybody knows that the challenges that we are facing are largely the battle for climate change, the battle for a lot of sustainability issues are going to be lost or won in cities. So we have a prominent role to play to help cities to advance.
Yeah, I will come to Turkey and I will come to specifically Istanbul later. But
All right, good. All right.
First, I want to ask you, you say we cannot resolve the climate crisis without cities. You also mentioned that during the symposium held here in Istanbul. So as far as I understand, cities are both the source of the problem and the source of the solution at the same time. So can you tell us how can cities be a solution to the climate crisis? What is the role that cities play and they can play in the future?
Yeah, I'm a cities person, and I don't think that cities are the problem. I think the way that we behave as human beings, if it's in the city or outside, how we produce and how we consume and how we consider the earth as kind of an infinite source of our kind of joy, that can't go on for a long time. And of course, where you see a congestion of people and activities, you see all these challenges kind of pile up. And at the same time, that's also the opportunity to, for example, decarbonize at scale. And if you look at the effect, or if you look, cities are responsible for 2/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, not only within the boundaries of the cities, but also through their supply chains, through the things that need to go to the city, the food that we eat. So the city as a space, the city is responsible for a lot of the greenhouse gas emissions and energy demand. And we've also seen, because a lot of people are moving towards the city, and we expect now the majority of people is already living in cities, but 2/3 of the world will be living in cities by 2050. So we need to cater for that growth of cities in terms of water, in terms of energy, in terms of food. But we have the solution. We have the solutions to cater for it, and we have the solutions to battle the climate crisis. And cities have such an important role. And maybe the last thing that I want to say is that the pandemic and the multiple crises that we are facing, the cities are in the news a lot. So the pandemic, the citizens in cities were actually at the front lines of the pandemic.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about the pandemic, by the way. Since you touched upon now, I want to ask you, because, due to lockdown measures, actually, pandemic significantly reduced carbon emissions in many cities globally.
Exactly.
But I guess it was a temporary trend. What did we learn from the pandemic, do you think, in terms of sustainable or more carbon natural and livable cities? And also, just a follow-up question, speaking of the pandemic, remote work, social distancing, spending more time outdoors, how did this whole experience, this whole process change the way we live in cities, and you think this is going to be permanent?
Well, I think that one of this, just from your and my own experience, not even based on our research, we've seen that our cities are not as good as we thought they might be. and our neighborhoods are actually terrible in terms of we were all confined in our houses, and walking the dog around the block or having a short walk in a neighborhood is actually not that pleasant because we have too little trees, we have too little sidewalks, we have too little public space. So the pandemic really confronted us with the fact that your living environment is extremely important for how you kind of experience life and how you socially interact. So that's the first thing. That's from the gut feeling. We've also seen that because of the pandemic, because what happens in times of crisis, people accept different behaviors and start to behave differently because of the crisis. We've seen in many cities in the world that, for example, bike lanes have been introduced, pop-up bike lanes. We have seen that the places where cars are parked are being transformed. Also here in Istanbul, which actually yesterday at the conference we had was showcased, actually parking plots are going to have become places where people can interact, to sit outside. We started to understand that actually cities have too little nature, too little green space to cater for everyone. So all this really established, we see a reverse. People, of course, now getting back to office, getting back into kind of their daily trajectories. But at the same time, we've seen people are using the opportunity, for example, work from home more often. We see a mind shift in how we think about cities. And I see this across the globe, that we used to think about cities as being something different than nature or leisure environment. And I think these things need to kind of intersect more often, and I think there's big appreciation and an opportunity to do that more.
So it's a good thing for urban planners then. What are the new trends or future trends for urban planners like you, especially after the pandemic?
So don't get me, the pandemic was not a good thing. The pandemic was a very bad thing. It turned it changed our mind.
Yes.
And that might evolve in something good. And I think what we see as a trend is a much more appreciation, much more solutions around nature, what we call nature-based solutions, building parks, planting trees, thinking about open and public space. We see also an increased trend in biking and active mobility. We see a trend in what became popularized as the 15-minute city.
Yeah, I heard about it.
Exactly, thinking, and this is what I was talking about, having quality of life in the proximity of where you're living. So the 15-minute city is really thinking about offering services, offering everything that you need in a radius that you can reach within 15 minutes. And that is really going to create a shift in how we used to think about cities and how we're going to think about cities. We think too much of cities as a kind of a big space in which here you work, here you live, there you go to a park, and we need to bring that much more closer together.
Mr. Rogier, I also want to ask you, we touched upon that the population in cities, and it will grow even further in the coming years, but rural population has been migrating to big and industrialist cities traditionally, but there's also a reverse migration trend, especially after the pandemic, and also as a result of economic, social and physical challenges. For instance, Istanbul's population dropped for the first time last year. So I want to ask you, can this trend also change the rural-urban balance in the long run, and what could be the implications? I know that you're a city person, not a rural person, but this you think shift might be also here for the years to come?
I see, if you look at the data, and if you look, for example, there's quite some data available in the US where we also do work. You see that there is the effect of the pandemic that you look at, you see more kind of regional urban realities play out. So businesses and people that move more, that have multiple choices to locate in the region, in the city region. So that's a trend that I expect that will continue, but it will not reverse the attraction that the city has. I don't know, but you've read probably a lot of people were thinking that now that they are, connected through wireless internet and can work everywhere, that they would buy a nice cottage in the village. But in the village, you also get the people of the village. It's a very different cultural experience than being in a city such as Istanbul, which is vibrant and of course congested, but at the same time offers so many of the good things that a city has on offer. So yes, you see regionalization, and I think also in the context of Istanbul, it will be a trend and an opportunity to look in planning terms a little bit more regional, to create points of attraction and to invest in infrastructure in different places in different cities in order to kind of, create a little bit more of a balance between the attraction of Istanbul and the other cities and towns in the region.
By the way, this investment, speaking of the investment, green finance, which was also the theme of the symposium, I think is very important for cities to become climate neutral, carbon neutral. So could you tell us how this green investment is important for cities? And for example, how much does it take for a city, approximately, let's say, to become a climate neutral? What kind of investment is needed, approximately?
So I think if you look at what is needed, if you look globally, we see that the biggest contribution to greenhouse gas emissions comes from buildings, the building sector, transportation, materials and waste. So 60% approximately from buildings, 20% from transportation, 15% from materials and 5% from waste. Globally, so of course that differs a bit. I think maybe Istanbul is 40% from buildings, I'm not sure, something like that. So that means that you need to start re-greening and developing alternatives for how we use energy in our buildings and how we use energy in transportation. So that means decarbonizing buildings, make them much more energy efficient, and you need to invest in that, in technologies that support that, investing in the electrification of transportation, electric cars, electric buses, and it means that you need to think about the circular economy. How do you kind of look at materials that you need for making buildings, for example, and what do you do with the buildings that are going to be demolished? So really the buildings and transportation and materials sector, if you get that right in a city, you are really able to decarbonize. And we can decarbonize up to 90% with the current technologies. So we don't need new stuff. We know exactly what to do. So then finance, that's what we need. So
how to attract more finance, and is there any motivation or incentive for private sector, let's say, to?
Yeah, first of all, there's a motivation to invest in energy efficient buildings. I mean, the current energy crisis makes you, me and others kind of rethink the energy bill we pay. So there's a huge drive in doing that right. The private sector is very interested, the private sector invests in it, but overall, in new technologies, in electric transportation, in new technologies for building efficiency, there are sometimes also hurdles. And where we see a huge opportunity, and yesterday at the symposium we had the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the World Bank, and the European Union, they provide green finance. And I think using that in order to catalyze private investment, that is the way to go. So that means that you use the international the opportunities to land international from available green finance to invest it in such a way that you open the way for private investment to come on because you provide guarantees, you provide whatever subordinated debt, so that the private sector sees little risk or less risk and is able to invest in it. And maybe I want to say one more thing, because some people think that investment in green technology, green buildings or transportation is expensive, but it's actually not if you look at if you look at a little bit of a wider business case, because we've researched and the data proves that investment in green buildings and transportation, renewable energy and solar provides way more jobs than investing in their alternative fossil fuel technologies. So it's a kind of a job creator, and that's very attractive for city leaders, such as here in Istanbul or Kadıköy or other cities here in Turkey.
What do you think about Istanbul, by the way? You work with a lot of cities all over the world. I want to ask your favorite cities, let's say, if you pick a city that inspires you the most, let's say, or several cities. Could you choose one? And what do you think about Istanbul in terms of sustainability, livability? What are your observations, opinions about the city?
I can say from the heart that I really love this city. I love the people. I love the food, of course. Now it's a very vibrant city, and the role of the water and the Bosphorus and the Marmara Sea is very important for, I think, the quality of life. Of course, I think the public, let's say, transportation and congestion is a huge challenge, and people suffering because it takes so much time to go from A to B. And I think in that sense, investing in the public transport system, but mainly in more active mobility, in more kind of neighborhood services, getting that right is very, very important. I really like Istanbul, and I think there's a huge opportunity. It is really possible to change this city in a sustainable city if we continue with the aspirations that yesterday the mayor of Istanbul and the mayor of Kadıköy actually showed what they're up to and how they look at thinking about the water issues, about nature, about transportation, about energy efficiency. It can be a more pleasant city with cleaner air, less congestion, less road fatalities. These are very important. Greener. Nevertheless, the open space of the water is an asset that not a lot of cities actually have. So,
what are some good models, good examples, do you think? I guess you are based in Rotterdam.
I'm based in Rotterdam, yes.
So how would you
So we have a river too. So,
so how would you compare, and what are the some good examples around the world, do you think, for Istanbul and for
Istanbul? So I really think that, and I think it requires a huge. I'm a Dutchman. I'm coming from Rotterdam, and in the Netherlands, you know, the model share and the people that use their bikes for daily commute is around almost 40%, 37%. Here in Istanbul, it doesn't go further than 2%, and because it's dangerous on the street. So, and now I hear people thinking, yeah, this guy from this small little town in the Netherlands. But we see this opportunity to change cities in being much more attractive for biking, much more attractive for walking. 50% of the people in Istanbul walk for their daily commutes and for their daily things. And it's terrible that if 50% of the people walks, 90% of the street is for the car. So we need to change that. And so, and you don't need a lot of big technologies. You need a bucket of paint, and ideally you need kind of separate bikeways and bicycle lanes for people that want to bike. And that's what you can learn. I think everybody that comes to the Netherlands sees the opportunity and the pleasure it gives if you can use the bike for daily commute.
I'm a biker, by the way. I'm biking every day from work to home, but I can't say that it's very secure, unfortunately. But it can be, as you say, I guess.
Yeah, you need separate. We have a publication actually that is focused on how cities can make safer and better bike lanes, and also to understand what it actually costs. Because if we talk about infrastructure investment, if we talk about green finance, infrastructure investment, we think about big concrete projects of infrastructure.
Right.
If we use the money to rewire Istanbul with much more active mobility opportunities, you're going to make a step change, a real step change.
I guess people think that it's not going to have a big impact on climate or sustainability, but it will make a huge impact,
It will make a huge impact,
if
of
you
course.
increase the amount of people.
Of course, of course, you need to do, it is not a silver bullet, you need to do and. You need to electrify private vehicles, you need to make public transport more attractive, electrify it, and you need to change neighborhoods being much more attractive for active mobility. And that's what we call the systems approach. If you get it all right, and people can use the bike to go to a bus, the bus to go to their work and back, and if you then clean transportation, the private vehicles for cleaner air, you start to create a completely different ecosystem. And with Turkey signing up to the Paris Agreement and being climate neutral or net zero by 2053, these are the only options. And the good thing is that creates so much better quality of life for people.
Right.
So the investments in these things they only have joy and clean air, safe neighborhoods, and good quality of life as a result. So it's not a question of should we do it or shouldn't.
I see. What are some other projects going on in other cities in Turkey, by the way? Is it only limited to Istanbul, or you have some other ongoing projects around the world?
I talked about building efficiency, about energy efficiency in buildings. We have a project, Zero Carbon Buildings is the project, and we help support the national authorities developing pathways for energy efficiency, for zero carbon buildings, and how can they use transforming the building sector to contribute to the nationally determined contributions, actually the contract that they make on decarbonizing Turkey. And we work with Gaziantep and with Konya on action plans, on actually doing it with the community of private sector, with legislators, with the city, but also thinking about what are the financial mechanisms that we have in order to move from a plan to action and implementation.
I see. Well, thank you very much. You gave me some hope.
All right, good. That's very good.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogier.
Thank you.
Evet, saat farkını böylelikle noktalamış olduk. Hollanda'dan kıymetli bir konuğum vardı. Şehir planlamacısı, bir mimar ve World Resources Institute'un burada düzenlemiş olduğu Yaşanabilir Şehirler Sempozyumu için İstanbul'daydı. Bizimle şehirlere dair, dünyadaki şehirlerin iklim değişikliğiyle mücadeledeki rolüne dair, biraz İstanbul'a dair de fikirlerini aktardı. Önümüzdeki hafta yine farklı bir konuyla, farklı bir konukla görüşmek dileğiyle. Hoşça kalın.